well. They're both the energy of sound waves. One is good, what you say before noon, the other you say after noon. So they're information, and that's information processing. But there's also, I'm just going to give you 90 seconds on this, and this is an entire book called The Developing Mind. There's also a way of defining the mind like this: an embodied and relational, self-organizing, emergent process that regulates the flow of energy and information. And this was offered back in 1992, and it stood the test of time over these 33 years. And it helps us understand how to parent well. Because self-organization is only what brain does. That's wrong, even though it's been taught for 2,500 years since the time of Hippocrates. The second thing it does, it says the mind isn't just within your body, it's broader than the brain, but it's bigger than the body. And the mind is actually in relationships. It's embodied flow we call relational connection that Dr. Neufeld so beautifully talked about today. What we're going to say is that optimal self-organization then is how we're going to define a healthy mind. Right? So if we're saying that the mind is this process here that's self-organization, then when that mind is taking that process that's regulating energy information flow and optimizing it, that's what a healthy mind is, and that's what parents are trying to do in developing a resilient mind in their child, or an educator can do in developing social emotional skills or mindset skills, whatever you want to call them. So you can ask the question, what optimizes self-organization? And here's the simple answer. It's a process we're going to name as integration. So how many of you read The Whole Brain Child? Just so I can say, raise your hand in the house. Okay, so you know that it basically takes the interpersonal neurobiology stance that integration is the basis of health, and it teaches a parent how to integrate their relationship so that they cultivate integration in the child's brain, and an integrated brain in the child creates a resilient mind and a flourishing life. So every time I redo the Developing Mind textbook, I ask my interns who work with me, I had 20 last time, show me that this is wrong. Show me one piece of evidence that goes against it. They can't even find one piece of evidence going against it, and many, many thousands of articles to support that idea. Relational integration, which basically is where you honor differences and promote linkages in your communication. Relational integration stimulates the growth of integration in the brain called neural integration. For the wonks in the room, you're going to grow the hippocampus that links different neurally separated memory systems. The corpus callosum that links left and right hemisphere together. The prefrontal cortex that links cortex, limbic area, brainstem, body, and social world. And the connectome becomes interconnected. If you don't like brain stuff, don't worry about any of that. Just remember integration. That's all you have to remember. How connected your brain is, the connection of the connectome, is the best predictor of every measure of well-being we have. So relational integration leads to neural integration, which is basically what secure attachment is, which leads to a resilient mind and a flourishing life. Any questions? End of talk. No. So that's the integration piece, and that's the basis of all those books. It's like a river over lifetime, amazingly, like the Danube. One bank on the Danube is chaos, the other bank is rigidity. The central flow is harmony that arises with integration. So that's a way to think about a person's life. And if you ask the question, well, how do you know if someone's life is going well? It's kind of simple. Are they stuck on a bank of chaos, bank of rigidity, or both? Or do they live with a flexible, adaptive, coherent, energizing, stable way of living? Sometimes a little chaotic, sometimes a little rigid, but generally in this harmony flow. And then they're living with flourishing. That make sense? Okay. So in one moment of time, like when my father would go into rages, he would break through what I named as a window of tolerance. So a window of tolerance is exactly like the river integration, only not across a lifetime, it's in a moment of time. And so if I have a certain temperament that's sensitive to fear, if something scary happens, I will break through my window into chaos or rigidity, and it'll be harder for me to get back to harmony. But if it's an issue related to anger or sadness, I don't have much of a problem with that, which is true. I can stay integrated, be in touch with anger, which is a very constructive emotion, to right or wrong. I can be in touch with my sadness, which is what arises when we have a disconnection from people we care about, or things we care about. And I can stay present with the sadness in very high intensities, but still stay integrated. Right? That's where the window of tolerance being wide is a useful thing. Okay, we're not going to go into here, but basically the whole brain child, all these books, take 9 domains of integration and make them practical for parents, or for educators, or therapists, or whoever. Or Mindsight goes through each of these 9. And these 9 just let you refine how do you create more integration in your life, and when there's chaos or rigidity, how do you know what to do about it? Okay, so now we're going to come back to the journey towards personality. So personality, as we saw on that slide, I'll just summarize it for you. Personality is defined as enduring patterns, not types, enduring patterns of emotion, thought, and behavior that persist across situations and stages of life. So I developed the personality you're going to see in a moment. I'm just using myself as an example so you can get a feeling for it. That would always tend toward the emotion of fear and anxiety, not towards sadness, not towards anger, because that was my temperament, and the way I adapted to my temperament was to develop a personality you're going to see in a moment. What we think happens is you start with wholeness in the womb, and then being born separates you from effortless being. And this separation activates our survival networks that absolutely have been shown to exist in our brain. And you can have agency be attacked, bonding attacked, certainty attacked, or all of them. But what we think happens is one of these in particular may be a little more sensitive, a little more intense in a given individual. Maybe there's some individuals, the research will show this in the future, all 3 of them are equally sensitive. But as we've said, if one is a little more sensitive, it's going to start reacting more. Then, as I pointed out, Carol Dweck found exactly the same 3. She calls agents, she's the one who came up with the growth mindset and the wonderful work about developing an approach to life that isn't fixed, but realizes you can grow. So when she came up with this theory in 2017, we published ours in 2010. So it was very exciting to see these independently discovered things that use different data sets. Hers was all of the research on personality. Ours was specifically 50,000 narratives of the Enneagram. We came to the same conclusion. She didn't mention the brain at all in any of her writings. We based ours totally on the brain. So they came to the same conclusion. So that's super exciting. And she has this great acronym, BEATS, Beliefs, Emotions, and Action Tendencies. And I add an S to it, which is the story of your life. So that's from Carol Dweck. Okay, so I'm going to go over this grid with you in detail here. And this will be our last slide. So you can sit back in the next half hour, and we're going to have time for Q&A. And what I want you to do first is just feel into this and see if any of this resonates with you. Because when you know your own personality pattern, you're going to become a more present parent. That's the whole idea of this. From a research point of view, you'll be able to develop a more coherent narrative about who you are, what matters to you. You know, my wonderful partner and wife, Caroline Welch, she wrote a book called The Gift of Presence, a Mindfulness Guide for Women. And in that book, you'll see how when people, she interviewed women, when people really get in touch with their purpose, they're getting in touch with this deep source of drive that I would suggest to you is aligned with these patterns of your temperament. that may never change that much, but you can express it in different ways. Okay, so let's review. Attachment is super important. It creates an attachment stance, which is completely changeable. If your attachment stance has been non-secure, it will drive one of these 9 patterns we're about to talk about into its lower level. And if your attachment has been secure, and if you move towards security as an adult, you can move your personality pattern to a higher level of the same personality. So the first thing that you may not agree with, but it's hypothesis, is that your attachment stance is changeable, but your temperament is not. Maybe future research shows that that's wrong.